two
Ooh, I
lads
like it.
talking. I don't know. Maybe it's coaches to coaches, like actors to actors, but people that actually know things. But irregardless, we're here to chat about some good topics. And first, I'll let you introduce yourself. Like I was saying before the call, pick generational run right now. Seeing the face everywhere, and rightfully so. I'm a big supporter of you. So let's hear your story, where you came from, your experience, and what you're aiming to shoot for.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on, man. And I will say you've had a hand in the quote unquote generational run. You've been a big supporter, so from early on, so I appreciate it very much.
Of course.
And it feels weird in a lot of ways. It feels like my strength and conditioning career is still in its infancy. But um, quick background, I guess. I was a teacher. I don't know if you know this about me, but I was a special education high school teacher for, oh geez, what was it? 8 years, because I didn't know what else I wanted to do. I was a stereotypical jock, uh, where all my obsession was with hockey. So I was like, plan number one was be a hockey player, and there was no plan B. So I was not a forward thinking athlete. I was the typical kid where like my English class, like if there was ever an essay or a paper due, the topic was hockey. I would find ways. I made my we had to do an argumentative essay when I was a junior in high school, and my argument was why fighting should stay in the NHL. So I was all that to say, very much a
Okay.
one-track mind growing up, and it was a hell of an essay, by the way, if I might
Yeah, I bet.
add. I still remember all my bullet points. But anyways, all that to say that I was very much a one-track mind athlete, and I played other sports too, lacrosse, baseball. Baseball was probably my second love. Um, Dabbled with football a little bit, broke my fingers, stopped playing football because it interfered with hockey, and that led me to college. So I played hockey through college, where I studied sports and rec management, which sounds like it might be relative to what we do, but it's really not. It was more the
Right.
business side of sports, and I think I chose it as my major because it had sports in the name. And again, I didn't. There was no forethought. There was no like plan. So that's what I did. And then from there, I became a teacher. My mother is a teacher. My grandmother's a teacher. So I became a teacher, which in hindsight now was super formative for me. And it is super because I mean, what are we but teachers? It's this.
Absolutely.
I always think of it as I just switched my subject matter to something that actually gets my juices flowing. Um,
Absolutely.
so I was a teacher while I was teaching. I was coaching hockey as well, at the high school level. I had a chance to coach some good players there, um, and I did unified track as well, which is like Special Olympics track,
Okay.
which was another cool experience for me. And ultimately, all just ways of I think it was great for me in learning how to build rapport and ultimately communicate with people who are all on different levels. Um, so that was big, and what I consider like I said, I still like feel like I'm in my infancy with my coaching here in S&C. I like to think I have a grasp of the X's and O's more than the average bear, but I think where my superpowers lie are in my ability to communicate and to see the human. Um, so I guess I'm probably more of a quote unquote like artistic coach than I am like a mathematic coach. I mean, we can all, you know, get better at both those areas, but that's where I see my biases. Um, and so now I work at a private sector gym in Plymouth, Massachusetts. We're about an hour south of the city, south of Boston. Um, and we primarily serve, right now, it's primarily middle school and high school students while the college kids are away. College kids will come back for the summertime and they'll stop in for breaks, which is always nice to get a couple sessions in with them. But I also get a chance to work with Gen Pop clients, a lot of adult clients. So my client spreadsheet spans from 9-year-olds to 65-year-olds, which is really really cool because every population I find has something different to offer and to teach me. Uh, but also there's lessons that I can apply from one that overlap to the other. So it's really really cool. I think that's been really formative for me in how I view what we do and seeing humans instead of just seeing athletes.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think when I start to reflect on what our roles are and what our capacities are to convey the information that we have, like the background that you're coming from is what leads to more of an elite performer, right? A elite level coach, someone that can represent and communicate to a large bandwidth of clients. And that's what it takes to be someone that's really good. Like we put a lot of people on pedestals for the pedigree in which they work in, the name of the school, the emblems, et cetera, et cetera. But it's really the smaller private sector or high school coaches that are able to like really educate, connect, communicate, and create these habits amongst these wide arrays of different clients. I think those are the true heroes, and you're one of them for sure. So it's been cool to see all your progress and everything you do with your athletes because you can see that connection. Even in the short videos, the fact that you can get some younger athletes to do things that might conventionally be different or might pressure them into positions or situations that they're not used to, or that definitely is complete different to most of social media. It's cool to see that, and you can see that they trust the process. So, and that's definitely a testament to like your background. I come from a family as well of teachers, and being able to just be in an environment of sport and school and be able to break down walls and create connections is just, it's been the biggest aid for me personally as a coach.
Sure. I always like that's. I'm starting to. It's funny. I feel like this all of this is kind of happening quickly, but I'm starting to get other coaches reaching out and like pieces of advice, stuff like that. And we both probably dish out like 100 nuggets right here. But one of the ones I always find myself spitting out first is like you need to know how to create connections. And communicate. It's a people business. At the end of the day, it's a people business. So if you can, you can know, and this, I'm preaching to the choir here, but you can know, everything in the textbook from front to back, but if you can't communicate that information, it's like it's an old Louis C.K. joke. It's like being rich in the currency of a country that no longer exists.
Right, right, right,
It's,
right.
it's
Yeah,
useless.
I
Um,
like that.
so yeah, it's been cool. It's been cool. And to the a thought I had while you were talking there. In working with such I guess, a wide spectrum of clients, I liken it a lot to the variability that I'm kind of injecting with the training, in that I'm getting reps with different things that are forcing me to think and kind of keeping me in this plastic state where I'm not like just entrenched in this one way of thinking, just working with one type of person or with athlete, so that when issues do come up with a certain population, like, oh, I've had experience with this, or I'm not just like stuck in this one track of thinking. Um, and there's always more to learn. There's going to be problems that I encounter that I can't even fathom right now. But it's nice to have, if you have those tools. And this is a I guess analogy I keep bringing up too is well, I used to bitch and moan about my math work in high school, and I would
Yeah,
talk to my mom like, why do I need to do this? I'm never going to use this. And she would always be like, it's teaching you how to think. It's teaching you the
right.
art of acquisition and the art of problem solving. Maybe you don't need the X's and O's, but if you can have a mind that can sort through things and pick out relevant information and arrive at a conclusion, that's the tool. That's the point. And it still didn't make me want to do my math, but now
No,
now it makes sense to me.
absolutely. And this is actually something I try to bring up a lot. I've been very fortunate to have a couple interns and now getting into this, like, I guess we'll call it minor mentoring, if you will, because I do not have the tenure to be giving some in-depth mentorship, but there's some areas. But with my interns, I'm always constantly pressuring them in the direction of being highly introspective and to view things from a very regressed and progressed, like very dissected point of view. So just looking at every exercise, we have to have the prerequisite knowledge to understand all the elements associated with an exercise, but be able to convey it in an extremely digestible manner, right? So it takes a little bit of that high degree of theoretical knowledge and high degree of psychological understanding and piecing all those pieces together, but without understanding that the process is to do the process. So like you said with school, this is I have a gripe with this. Kids are always like saying this all the time. I work with high schoolers. They're like, "Why? What's the point of this? What's the point of this?" And I wish more teachers and educators would just say the point of this is the problem solving.
Hmm.
right? We're putting you into situations where we are giving you information. We're looking for a solution. You have enough information to solve that problem. Now go through the process. And what that forces you to do is remember things, to put things into action, to be introspective and question yourself, like, why did I make that choice? And further on, further forth, you have all these tools to solve problems, right? So it
Hmm.
comes all the way back to what you're saying is like working with all these different populations, you're just adding tools to your toolbox. And yeah, like you might have a wrench and you might have a screwdriver, but if you have all the different types of screwdrivers at different sizes and different lengths, you're going to be able to solve a lot of problems once that screw is too deep or too shallow or, needs extra torque. So
Sure.
I like that you say that because it really comes down, sport is dynamic problem solving, right? And then the
Mhm.
ability to coach to make them efficient at sport and transfer all these qualities we work with is problem solving in itself, but then the same issue we see in school is the same issue we see with coaches where they get so ingrained with the theoretical foundations. It's like, well, it's got to be this, this, and this. And I think I don't remember word for word what you posted the other day, but the post I particularly like is just talking about like why does it always have to be about specific capacities or fitting into a specific like getting a square to fit into a square hole when the reality is we're just trying to get them to solve as many problems physically as we can,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I actually, so my first like post where I directly addressed someone's, I guess, for lack of a better term, like opposition or challenging to one of my posts where I was talking about movement exploration, and essentially what we're talking about right now. Like, let's divorcing myself from the idea of like, all right, let's make them a better hockey player, a better basketball player.
Yeah,
Let's make them
yeah.
a better mover and a better acquisition of movement and better problem solver. And the challenge was, or the comment on it was something along the lines of, oh, what did he say? Something along the lines like, if the specific move, if only the specific movement of the sport survives on the sport field. And I'm like, well, okay, yes, I know if you want to become better at skating, you should go skate. Yes, we all understand that. Like that's a very obvious thing. You've missed the point. My whole point is to not do that. I want to give them something that's completely variable, because the reality is too with youth populations, and you know this, they're getting a shitload of exposure to their sports and to those patterns and to those inputs week after week, month after month, and usually 12 months out of the year. So I'm not going to double down on that dose and pour like a watered down version of that. That's not my role in the gym. I'll let the sport take care of that. So my point here is to, yes, I'm trying to give them different patterns and different problems to solve. Um, for exactly why we're talking about, to exercise that part of the brain, to put them into that plastic state where it's not the same inputs, it's not the same patterns, it's not the same ways of thinking, um, and in the hopes that they will then have this skill and have this tool in their toolbox that they can apply anywhere they want to apply it.
Well, absolutely. And I don't know how you I've known that like sorry, I've recognized that as I've evolved in my career, if you my early career, I start to see things in a particular way. So like I start to look at our sessions as like this might sound totally batshit crazy, but when I look at them lifting certain
Wow,
things,
let it rip.
I see like I see in my head some form of like laser or light that points in the direction of where the force is going, right? So like if I'm thinking about them doing today, the guys were supposed to be doing, and I'll bring this around, I hope. They're doing speed trap bar deadlifts. So like in my
Okay.
mind when I see it, it's like there's this other dimension, if you will, where I can see that if they're just not fully locking out their hips and they're doing just a conventional deadlift, like that force is stopping at a ceiling, right? Versus like if they're really powering through, maybe there's a bit of plantar flexion, bars going up fast. I can imagine that there's a big explosion of power. Like that's how I view things, right? Or I see muscles, how they contract and lengthen, and how they would be, what the tension on the muscle would look like depending on the contraction speed and stuff like that. That's how I kind of view things. So with that kind of mental visual checklist, when I'm looking at a session on the board too, like I see how everything's kind of interlaid, and I get a tendency to see like, okay, we're stressing too much here. We're stressing too much here. We're stressing too much vertical pressing or horizontal pressing, et cetera, et cetera. So a roundabout way of saying that it's often easy for us, and we have our own ways of recognizing these simple patterns within the structures of the programs that we build, but it's difficult for the youth to see. They just think like if we're doing a dumbbell bench, it's not the same as a barbell bench, or it can't benefit the two, or we're always moving in the sagittal plane, like blah blah blah, right? So, but then we see that alternative movements moving outside the conventional.
They pick out the obvious differences, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And but we can recognize that, which is good, and we can talk again about how we convey information, but it's more from the standpoint of they see themselves playing hockey. That's all that they do. They don't recognize the movement patterns associated with it. They don't think that there's benefit of doing a Cossack squat because it influences the hip internal external rotation or mobility, like they don't think about those things. So all to say that when we can expose them to alternative movement patterns that doesn't look like what they're used to, they get really scared, right? So how do you approach getting these athletes to buy in to things that are unconventional, uncomfortable, or just, different?
The quickest way and the most effective way that I've found is it's not a sexy answer, but I just do it myself. I'll just
Mm,
do it with them. Uh, Maybe show a couple of failed reps or clumsy reps, maybe intentionally to let them know, like, hey, I don't give a shit if this looks terrible on your first go here. So making them feel comfortable looking stupid, or trying to just get rid of embarrassment from the equation. And I think the easiest way to do that is if you're the leader in the room and you're fine looking, if you don't have so much of an ego where you can't look stupid or you can't do something
right,
kind of
right,
silly, um, and just let like so it comes from cultivating that environment, and that that's you can do that acutely or chronically over time, where you take the time and they're aware over time that all right, this is the type of space this is. We can try things out, we can fail here, that's okay. um, but yeah, just getting involved and maybe falling on my own ass a couple times is or saying something stupid, just keeping it light in those exploratory moments. And that doesn't mean the whole session is like a drum circle where or like
right.
everything's nothing matters. So I think it's important to be clear about, like, okay, this is an exploratory part of the session and we're trying different things. We can kind of be a little bit uh, silly here, and sometimes it's more intense than others. Sometimes the exploratory, there's some high outputs tied to it too. Um, but making that a safe time to try stuff out and to fail. And then, when we get into our other things where I'm really looking for focus and for outputs and for specific stuff, we know to turn the dial and to dial in there.
That's good. And for sure, like I've found that some form of a gamification, or I said to the girls basketball team the other day, like the best way to warm up is with a smile. And like if we can get into a mood, they all kind of laugh and they're like, that's super corny. But hey, now, dopamine rush, you're happy, you're smiling. We had a joke, just getting that quick touch point where you can get everyone mentally invested, kind of take a bit of the weight off the shoulders and have some fun right away acutely is a massive buy-in, right? You
Mm-hmm.
get silly moments and it allows you to stretch the line. I think a lot of coaches set up this very definitive line of like, okay, I'm the boss, it's authoritarian, you got to do this, that, and the other, but the reality is we are a bit more of the fun coach category, if you will, and we get to toe the line. So I think our line is a little bit more malleable or plastic. So it's nice that you can invite a bit of less seriousness, allow them to goof around, let them make mistakes. And realistically, we know that if athletes are in a relaxed environment and a relaxed body, they get to move freely, right? They get to do things involuntarily that they might not think or be able to do if they're voluntarily trying to do it. So it's nice to be able to trick them into an environment where they can passively learn. But at the same time, you know, everything has a reason and some things don't have to have a reason. And I've found that, testing the waters, doing things like you said, experimenting, showing them what I can do or testing it out myself, being a goofball breaks down a barrier and allows them to, just dive headfirst in instead of being reserved.
Yeah,
So,
no, absolutely. Go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, so in extension to that, so communication, I'm interested in this is something that came up when you were speaking. So talking to my interns, and I'll give you some background. Talking to my interns yesterday, I'm trying to push them to be a little bit more autonomous and to be able to communicate to a group. So there's some things that we do inherently. If you've played sports or been a part of a sporting team a lot, you kind of know how to project, how to speak, how to use the space, but it's not inherent for a lot of people. So
Mhm.
I'm working with my interns to be able to, conduct themselves, be open, talk to the boys, speak to them, be clear, be understanding of what you're doing. So my question to you is, when you're communicating, what are some things that you're aware of? And I'll give you an example of, and when I mean aware of, like what are some key ways that if you were to talk to new coaches about how to communicate, you would go about it. And just an example for me is when I talk about variations, that's been a big thing with my interns. Is like, don't give variations when you speak of them as a definitive statement. Like you can or you have to do this and this. The way you deliver options to a young cohort is important. You don't want to leave things too much up for interpretations and provide some constraints while also not giving them too much freedom. So it's like, guys, we have a squat of choice today. You can do front squat, Bulgarian split squat, or back squat. That's what we go. We're not going to do air squat. We're not going to do pendulum, right? So, what are
Sure.
ways you communicate to ensure that your constraints are met, as well as how do you communicate based on the cohort that you're working with?
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess to address that direct question from more of like the X's and O's standpoint, or the semantics of this session, doing just what you said, like giving them some autonomy, like you staying with the squat example, um, saying, okay, we're squatting today. Here are your options. And if I don't go overly into it, if they just pick an option and go, that's fine. I don't feel like I have to like continue like, okay, well, here are the, idiosyncrasies of this particular, unless if they ask, doesn't the other day I had a kid ask, is there a difference between barbell bench press and dumbbell bench press? Okay, he's interested. I'll dive into it a little bit with you, and we'll talk about what are the little differences between the two things. So not feeling the need to over communicate or like prove to the 15-year-old kid that you're smart. Uh,
Yeah.
I feel like because we can very easily do that. And I've certainly been guilty of that myself,
Oh,
especially
for
when you're
sure.
like in that, you're coming up and you're younger and you feel like you have something to prove. Um, and that can be an easy thing to fall in. But if a kid asks the question, sure, I'll dive into it with you. And then I guess more of uh, I guess a general, or for lack of a better word, like more intangible way of looking at communication, besides just like that specific question, is getting the temperature of the kids kind of almost individually as they come in to the sessions.
Right.
And I know it's probably different for you guys because they probably show up as a team, so you might not have a moment to have a one-to-one with each kid. Uh, I have the luxury right now where, especially in the wintertime where our numbers aren't crazy right now. And even when they are busier, usually I can get a touch point with each kid as they come into the gym and just kind of get a gauge of where they're at on that day. And that might tailor, and I mean, you probably communicate to every kid differently anyways, but depending on where the kid's at that day, who the kid is, will typically impact, not crazily so, but this is, I mean, I guess this comes like the art of coaching and the art of communication is like you might communicate a little bit differently to one group than the other group based on, the people that are comprising, making up that group. Um, and I don't know how to refine that skill other than just getting reps. Like you have to talk to people, you have to get comfortable talking to people and getting a sense of where they're at, what type, like what's their temperament, what's their personality, and then you pick up on the little like idiosyncrasies of like where they're at on a given day. Like, oh, he's something's going on because usually he's pretty chipper, usually they're this way, and something's
Yeah.
up. So I think just again, just being a human and communicating and refining those skills, um, it makes the delivery of the X's and O's flow that much better, and I received that much better.
For sure. And I love that. Like we build these very deep connections because we see these kids all the time, and I have the
Yeah,
benefit that without a doubt I see 6 teams a day. I know who's on those teams and I know what they're like, and just making an effort to get that touch point at some point during the session is invaluable, right? Like you said, you get that gauge, and I we like to go to the X's and O's, the force plates, and all this sort of stuff to identify some form of like preparedness. But really, the psychological influences are going to be the ones that really going to dictate who's ready to go and who's not. So to be able to recognize the characters, to see the energy, and just get those touch points and be like, okay, you know what? This guy today, he's usually chipper, as you said, and now all of a sudden he's like not looking at anybody, he's staring at the ground. It's like we got a problem, and then that allows us to make influences on our interventions. But more so, because
sure.
you work with a lot of younger populations as well, like being able to connect and be a figure that they are comfortable and trust is invaluable, right? So for a lot of them, of course, they're like, well, you're just a strength coach, but at the end of the day, there's someone who they can confide in, they trust, they learn a lot of things, and a lot of what we teach them is down the road lessons, right? And they don't
Hmm.
recognize it in the moment, but a year or two out of high school or they've been gone for a little while, you get that classic text, "Hey, I just want to say thank you. I never put full effort in, but I just want you to know that all the work you did is appreciated." And you're like, "Yeah, I know, but you're a little shit, but I appreciate you
Yeah.
reaching out for stuff." So the impact is immense for sure. Um,
Had well, you're I think one of the first, actually not I think, I'm sure the first conversation that connected us was and I feel like I think of this when I think of you, was an archetyping conversation, uh, which is something that uh, I'm very interested in, and I'm curious about. I think I do. There's elements of it that I think I implement kind of intuitively with
mm,
some of the kids. And again, so if I have a group of middle school kids, like we're going to play games, we're going to have fun. But if I have and it might just be as simple as an emphasis or a conversation that I have with a kid. If I recognize like there's a strategy that they tend towards,
right,
or a way of moving that they tend towards, and one that they struggle with, I might take a little bit more time to, if we have like a super quote unquote like muscular kid and who has got no bounce at all, I might take a little bit more time to talk through like, okay, what are some things or some cues or some ideas that I can put in their head to help them find their bounce.
right.
So I think that's probably the extent to which I do it right now. It's not, I don't make huge interventions with the session itself. Um, so I'm curious. I mean, and you can take that anywhere you want. I'm just for selfishly curious to kind of hear thoughts on it and just, I don't know, let the conversation go where it goes.
For sure. I've grown to love and hate this topic, to be honest, because it's funny. Like I'm gonna use a pun. I've gotten bucketed into this this group of coaches who talk about this stuff all the time, which I'm very thankful for. And why I love and hate it is because I love it because it has such a great applicability to provide individualization to kids in a group setting that typically want to have something that's individual, right? So if we were to strip everything back and not think about archetyping, we as coaches recognize, and I lived and died by this for a long time, that GPP is what youth athletes predominantly need. And I work with kids up to 23 in the team setting, but even them with lower training tenure, they still need GPP centric training, right? So but the issue that you're going to run into time and time again is that yes, you're dealing with kids that need general physical preparedness, but that doesn't just blanket it as the same training for everyone. The approach that we're going to take is going to have to be somewhat individual to their body types because they're maturing, they're changing, and they're predisposed to anthropometrics that are different. Like I have kids that are 15 years old that are towering over me. Like they just don't move the same way as I do as a 28-year-old. Like
Sure.
everyone's different. So we do have to broach or take an approach that is going to start to bucket and move people in certain areas that are going to target their needs based on their anthropometrics, how they interact with force, their discrepancies or their limitations. And irregardless, if we want to take a true archetyping approach of elastic, muscular, underdeveloped, or whatever you want to go, we still have to provide some. I think it's best to create some form of buckets, some form of specifications based on a consistent track program, like not track and field, but like track.
Sure.
So what I started to do is like I at the beginning of my career, I was kind of like just trying to fit squares into circular holes by having these really skinny string bean elastic guys, as I now recognize them as elastic. I'm like, they need physical armoring, they need to be squatting super low, they need to be doing this, that, and the other. And it's just like, no, I know you need this. You're like a little frail kid. But who were those kids at the same time? Our top goal scorers, the guys with the
Yep.
big heads, the guys who get sore when we lift, and it's a bit of this fighting, right? You're like, fuck, man,
Yeah.
like you just need to do this shit. Like
They
you're
don't
weak.
want to be in the weight room in the first
Of
place.
course, and they're
Yeah.
allergic to it.
Yeah.
But then the maturity in coaching comes from recognizing there's a lot more depth to what I knew. I reviewed what I knew. I started to ask questions. I talked to people way smarter than me, and I started to understand, okay, there are other elements here involved. And there is a reason why this particular kid, and it didn't matter what their name was, because that same kid was in the program every year, you know?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
were just someone was taking his spot. And then I recognized, okay, I'm not going to fight this anymore. I'm going to understand why it is that this kid who's supposed to be a first round draft pick prospect doesn't want to go in the gym. Like, come on, kid, you need this. It's your if you want to have a long career. So, anyways, then you start unraveling. You recognize that there's similarities amongst these very elastic, springy, small kids and their movement predispositions, their strategies for movement, their anthropometrics. And then you recognize, okay, this type of training that I was having the big burly guy do isn't suited for the string bean. But then when we go and do our plyometrics, dry land stuff, it's like, wow, buddy can just pop up, touch the rim, no problem.
Sure.
But he can't deadlift, 3 plates on a trap bar. Like what's going on here? So then, like I said, peeling back layers and then recognizing that there are obviously some deep-rooted nuances with force interactions, elastic versus muscular dominancy, and et cetera, et cetera. So once I get to that point, I start to correlate both the psychological influences of how people associate with the gym, their anthropometrics, and then obviously their force characteristics. And then that's how I kind of started to make my bucketing system. And obviously it falls in line with a lot of other common bucketing systems. I talk to Tanner and start to evolve my process based off of his. I talk to Hunter and start to evolve off of his, and it becomes your own system with regards to your own cohort. And so now the way I look at it is there's two central pillars for the purpose of archetyping, and it's one to make sure we check that box of like I work with prep school hockey players and junior hockey
Hmm.
players. Like they all think they're supposed to be in the show, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
the last thing you're gonna do is try and
I was
die on a
there.
hill.
I was
Yeah,
that guy.
for sure, for sure. You're like, what the hell? Why do I not have my own personal program? Like they can be in
Yeah.
a small, tight gym with 25 other guys, see that there's one dumbbell rack and one and a half squat racks, and be like, I don't understand why I'm not getting my own program, you know?
Yeah.
So
Well,
out of
I was a
this,
little bit more of a brute though. I was down to get after it with heavy rocks if we had to. I wasn't
yeah,
picky about that. But that was
that's
my archetype. I was the lug. I was the gritty guy. I wasn't the slick, bouncy guy. I didn't stick handle around you. I chipped it around you and went through you.
right.
Not a lot of finesse over here. But
No,
anyways,
but you love the gym, I imagine, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
there's good things and bad things. A lot of times you see those kids that do love the gym, they're also the ones that are a bit more resistant to what we're doing because it's more sport performance centric rather than just fucking pound and bench and squat, you know?
Sure.
So just go back, there's become two central pillars for me in terms of archetyping. One being, let's check that box of individualization. I think it's good to expose athletes that need particular things to get exposed to that. But at the same time, the way archetyping and obviously season phase works is in off season, we're working on more weaknesses, and then it slowly filters out to more strengths when season to avoid novelty, et cetera, et cetera. So they're getting exposed to stuff all year round anyways. So we get that individualization, but the other big one has become resource management. So, like many people, I mean, I'm jealous of your facility, not gonna lie, but a lot of us high
It's not my
school,
facility, by the way. It's not. I'm just a coach at the facility. I can't take
well,
credit for the
the one
facility
you get
stuff.
to
But
work
anyways,
in every
yes,
day.
yes.
The facility I get to work in every day is just a glorified broom closet with some mirrors and a couple racks, right? So you have these kids rolling in that are, going first in the queue. Some will go on NCAA D1, some have gone to the NHL, and you're like, okay, how are these kids that are in a prep school system that are paying a lot of money and expect to be completely individualized? How am I going to get them to operate efficiently in a room with just about nothing? And it's forced me to be very creative. And ultimately, resource management has become a huge pillar in the archetyping system by recognizing we can meet the needs and the demands of specific athletes while effectively using what we do have, and that's filtered into a very basic example is we can have one group that needs bilateral squatting, needs bilateral strength. So we're going to have them squat. They need to be hitting deeper range of motion. So we're going to do a full range motion back squat, Hatfield squat variation, squat rack, barbell. We have an elastic athlete who limited in range of motion, still needs lower body strength, but we're going to use a trap bar. And then another group, hybrid, let's call them, or eccentric deficient, we're going to use a long yielding isometric. So now we've effectively got people out of the racks and using barbells over here, guys using trap bars, and people using squat rack and bars. So in essence, what we've now checked the box of hitting exactly what each group needs with the overall arching, what would we call it? A theme of the day. So if the theme of the day is bilateral strength, we've touched
Mhm.
on that and we've effectively used resources. So anyways, ultimately, I've kind of been able to use something that was predominantly used to individualize to effectively use resources more efficiently while touching on the individualization. So that's kind of like the my archetyping adventure.
No, that was dope. I have a couple questions if you
Mm,
are up for a couple more questions that
please.
came up with that. Um, so, and you kind of alluded to this. Well, I'll ask this one first. Um, Medicine versus superpowers. Like, how do you find that the balance of like, okay, this is what you're deficient in. This is what I think you need or can stand to improve on versus this is what makes you really good. Let's keep feeding that. How do you strike that balance? Is that you have like a framework for that? Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll try and be robust or a little more granular in my answer to this because there are obviously a lot of nuances and there's a lot of people that will say certain things in response to what I would say. So, and what those things would be is there's a lot of talk right now about we shouldn't fully periodize or we shouldn't macro periodize and like be too like rigid in our periodization, right? And
Hmm.
and I believe and I'm very much of a response-based coach, but at the same time, I have 100 and something athletes to just me with no support. So
Sure.
you have to have some rigidity to your planning. You can
Hmm.
respond based on like small variables, like we mentioned. This kid comes in, Joe comes in, you're like, he's not looking good. All right, we're going to take a bit of volume off today. Or, maybe we're going to cut this out because I know you don't like that. Like that's micromanaging. But from a planning standpoint, I do recognize that there is rigidity in what I'm going to approach block to block. I
Hmm.
know that in a GPP phase, I am going to emphasize maybe 60% of the general movement selection is going to go, or not GPP, but more like our first off-season, true off-season block will be
Sure.
60 to 70% of the exercise selection will go towards things they're not good at. And
Hmm.
as we move along, depending on the athlete or the group, I will take exercise selection based on the season phase. And when we're in season, I like to prolong our off season into the first kind of quarter of our season because I have my kids go away, so I'm kind of dealing with getting them back up to speed. So maybe I'll trickle our preseason into late October, maybe November even.
Mhm.
So in that time, I am still touching a little bit more on weaknesses. So in my mind, I view off season as a bit of a continuum of really high weakness, and we'll slowly taper off. We'll have a bit more of a touch right before the season starts, and then we'll taper it off again. And then when we get in season, mostly their strengths.
That makes
Um,
sense because I would assume one would assume that their weaknesses are just going to be more stressful on their system as a whole. It's not what they're good at,
Absolutely,
so
for
it
sure.
makes sense to plug it into that part of their annual training cycle.
For sure. And it's like I said, it's a continuum and it's not a perfect science, but we also routinely test and then there's the response to those results, right? So if I do recognize that a kid is missing, they're eccentrically deficient, I am going to intervene and maybe put a few extra things in there to see how they respond to the training. And if they do respond positively, then we can move things around. So there is that response-based approach, if you will. The one other thing I will say outright is that there is no point that weaknesses are not touched on. I
Sure.
am like I all the time. And reality is we don't get enough touch points in season, and the school season basically starts end of September and runs right till March, end of March. And in that time, I think I've calculated we have about 78 training sessions in that whole time, which is not a
Hmm.
lot, right? So the reality is we have to juggle between, yes, we know that the novelty of something that they're not necessarily good at is tough on their body, but they're also teenagers, so they respond very quickly. They're already under a
Yep.
lot of stress. So then it becomes a juggling act of if we are trying to get a particular adaptation, sometimes it's better to live with the evil you know than the evil you don't know. So it's like, how about we dose them with things they're not really good at so that we get an adaptive stimulus because we have a little bit of exposure, if that makes sense.
Sure. No, it makes sense. At least getting touch points with it, so they never get too far away from it. So even when you can turn the dial up on it, they've been getting touches with it, even if it's just little bits of volume. Um,
Absolutely.
no, that's great. And then my other, well, I guess I had two more questions, but how much of it, and I guess this might be a subjective answer, but and you kind of alluded to it, how much of it is a carrot for them, a psychological carrot of like, oh, I'm
Mhm.
doing the things that, uh, A, this is for me, this is special for me because of all of what we just discussed. And also it's things I might have it more of a proclivity towards because I'm better at it. Uh, so how much of the value of this style, I guess, or viewing things through this eye or giving these kids this thing, how much of it is a psychological carrot versus oh we're actually getting good physical uh, responses and adaptations from it.
That's a good question. I mean, I definitely can't assign any percentage to it, if you will, but I would
And
say
of
like
course, one leads into the other, right? If you're psychologically engaged, then it's going to lead to the other. But anyways, I'll let you answer the question.
yeah, for sure. I think I view it at yeah, like an early carrot, like a little like a pre-Christmas present, a little stocking
Sure.
stuffer where it's like, hey, you know what? Like we're gonna be a little more individual based on the type of athlete you are. And I do the little educational bit at the beginning, showing them and talking to them like why am I because I do tend to use their true classification. I'm like, you are in the eccentric deficient group. You are in the force deficient group. So it's the little touch point of education where they start to associate with particular language. So, but they see this right away. They, what the hell is this? And so I do the education
Mm.
part, but they're teenagers, so they forget right away. But
Yeah,
so
of
it's
course.
like the main message is boys, girls, this is for you that's going to make you better based on what you typically like to train with. And they're like, oh, okay. So immediately they're like, all right, I'm invested. Oh, yeah, I love doing this. I love doing this. So the intent is driven. Obviously, novel stimulus, intent, buy-in, decent exposure at the beginning of the season, rapid results. They're also teenagers, so steroids, right?
Yep.
So, and that kind of helps. If we can kind of, instead of, like I keep using the expression, putting a square into a circular hole, but if we can show them that they're a circle and we're putting them in a circular hole, they're going to feel comfortable. They're going to like bring their guards down and they're going to buy in a little bit more. And then in conjunction with just quality training, good environment, they see the results and then it kind of just speaks for itself after that. Then it's micromanaging characters, like it's the season, they saw something on Instagram and you got to coach them away from that. Or but anyways, I think yes, it's a bit of a carrot, but it's not intentionally designed to just be a carrot.
Sure. No, that makes total sense. Do you ever feel like you lose because now they're all generally doing the same stuff at the same time? Do you ever feel like that takes away from like the I guess collective environment? Like we're all the team environment, like we're all on the same page, all doing the same thing at the same time. Because there's something to be said for that. I found when in my sessions, because we get a mix of age groups, we get some we try not to, but sometimes it just happens. Sometimes we have some older kids in there with some younger kids, and it feels a little bit disjointed. You kind of lose that cohesion. Um, how do you manage that? How do you keep everybody kind of like we're still like doing slightly different things, but we're still here together after the same goal?
Right. Now I have to say I'm fortunate in terms of the gym that I'm working in. We have no there's no way we can't be together, you know?
Gotcha,
So like we're
gotcha,
forced to be
gotcha,
together. So if you
gotcha.
saw this place, like the interns sometimes are like, what the hell is going on? The first day, this was great this year. The first day the interns were there, for some reason the coaches decided to cancel their ice. And they like the kids don't think like if they always work out at 4:45 to 6 and their
Mhm.
practice is canceled, they just automatically think, "Oh, we'll go to the gym at 3:30." And then next thing you know,
Like
so I
you're
have
sitting
interns.
waiting.
Yeah, I'm sitting there. I'm talking to my interns. I'm like, all right, you'll get to meet the boys. It'll be an easy day. They just came from back from break and everything. Anyways, we end up having 46 guys in this same gym, and that's too much for most gyms. But this is all in like, I don't know, a 20 by 20, like tiny little gym. So it was overwhelming. But so we have no choice but to feel connected. Now, there's obviously elements of like music. I like to do if someone's late, karaoke. If or karaoke, sorry, karaoke, not just karaoke. If
Got it,
someone's
got
late,
it.
we do karaoke. Um, we like to do jokes. We always do team-based activation stuff. So like we're always connected, right? And everyone's
Yeah,
so close together. Um, plus they're coming off the ice, so they've had that like that team touch point, you know, like they're together,
right.
they're in the locker room, they go to the ice, they come work out or vice versa. So
Yeah,
what we don't really struggle with that. Um, and there's an added benefit of when you're working in smaller groups of similar type of athletes doing similar workouts of things that you're more or less good at. It drives a little bit more intent and it drives a little bit more connection and competition. So to be honest, I found like the integration of this archetyping system into our particular situation and cohort has only amplified their buy-in
yeah.
and connection as a team.
That's awesome. No, that's the part, dude. I probably missed the most about coaching hockey is, uh, and not that I don't love what I do now, but the team aspect where everybody they're boys and they got the inside jokes and they're with
Yeah.
each other every single
Yeah.
day. Uh, I love that shit, man. I miss it. Um, yeah, you just brought me back a little bit. I miss that stuff. Having we used to do team workouts when I was still teaching. I would have them before I was doing S&C. I've always been training people, just
Right.
never officially as a profession. So I would have them do in-season training, and it was the best because they're going hard, but then they're also messing around, and
Yeah.
it's a good time.
Oh yeah. They keep me young.
Cool, man. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good. All right. Well, we're coming close to the end here. I could chat all day, but how about we do
Yeah,
a
likewise.
bit of a coach 'em up, rant and rave? Like, what's on
Okay.
your mind right now that's kind of giving you a bit of a hard time, and what's something that I don't know, either good advice or that you're loving?
Um, something that's good. I mean, it's always easy to be like to jump on the like the sports specific crowd. That's kind of almost
Yeah.
becoming like a trope at this point. Uh, I'll say because this is something that I kind of have to navigate myself, being in the private sector and having to do a bit of marketing online. Um, is sometimes I think people will get a little bit careless with their marketing, where, and maybe I'm hyper focused on it because, you know, we're in the space and we're like, you could be a little bit, you could clean up how you say that a little bit. But to the point where it becomes misleading for people who don't know any better. If you're like, oh, this, you know, this exercise that this athlete must do, or like this, that type of language. Um, and there's all different iterations of it. But when, I guess when marketing, and you're gonna, I'm not a good businessman because of this, but when when marketing and the language and the decisions you make supersedes, in my opinion, like what your moral code should be as a coach, or like I feel like it's our duty to try to relay the correct information or what we believe is the correct. Um, so I guess just having some scruples with that stuff, and like, you know, not uh, letting your marketing get in the way of, still, I think you can do it. I think you can do both. And maybe you don't get rich overnight. You know, maybe you don't have the thing that, you know, grabs a bunch of people all at once. Um, but so be it. Again, I'm not a good businessman, but I'd rather have a slower growth and I guess stick to my guns. Not that I'm trying to put myself on a pedestal here or like a holier than thou thing, but it does bug me when coaches who I know better, like I know, you know, that's not necessarily true, but it sounds like a sexy thing to say, or a thing that's gonna. I know what your intentions are here.
Right. Yeah, I'm right there with you, and it's a difficult time, right? Like your popularity continues to grow, my popularity continues to grow, and you get to a certain threshold where, like, you do have to recognize we recognize, I should say, that the volume has a benefit to it. So the more people you can, reach, the more possibility you do have to monetize those sort of things. And it's a double-edged sword because unfortunately, the honest finish last in these situations, right? Like
Yeah.
people aren't lining up to hear us talk about the nuances of communicating certain values within a training environment. Like even though those are the things that matter most, people aren't like, well, what's that going to do for me? They just shut off, right? So it's so difficult because these people out there continuing to make a lot of money off of this, that, and the other because they're specializing or majoring in the minor and just trying to trick people. And does it mean that the things are selling? Well, we think of like a ATG, we think about like Goda and all these sort of things. Like there are some things that they do that have merit and value,
Sure.
but it
Yeah.
but it's only one simple piece in the larger equation. But when you capitalize on people's naivety, it's just being a bit of a crook. But at the same time, unfortunately, being a devil's advocate is that if you and I all of a sudden had an influx of every follower we had paying $20 a month, like you do the math, you're like, oh shit, that's a lot of money. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's always a difficult position to be in. But I guess if we have the benefit of having, somewhat stable income working in different institutions, and then we have the ability to reach out and provide our services at will with people that we want to work with,
Mhm.
that's a bit of a better situation. But yeah, it's a difficult profession.
Yeah, it's tricky. I gave myself a big cushion, dude. I worked, so I lived at my parents. I'm actually at my parents' house right now because I work in
Nice.
Plymouth, but I live in another town. Long story short, I'm here right now, but I lived here while I was still a teacher and like coaching like 4 different teams. So I had no overhead. So I just built
Yeah.
this big nest. So then when I jumped ship from teaching and my security and my steady paycheck, I was
Right.
like, I don't have to panic right now. I can let
Right.
the slow build happen, and for better, for worse, it's allowed me to take things slower. I think for better.
For sure. No, that's good. And I guess last, like, we'll end with some positivity. What's something that you're seeing right now that you like?
Um, Dude, honestly, I feel like this might be a cliche thing too, but like conversations like this, I've been pleasantly surprised. I guess as I've gotten more of I guess eyeballs and more attention within the industry, or we'll just say just have grown. Um, Other coaches' willingness to hop on the phone or hop on a call, whatever it might be, and just chop it up. Has been awesome. And obviously there's still ego out there. There's still some gatekeeping and stuff like that out there. But by and large, like I've been very, very like grateful and pleasantly surprised by the just community of coaches. Um, there's a lot of really good dudes out there. I think it's easy for us to get. I mean, everybody loves a villain, so it's easy to get like hyper fixated on the villains.
Mm.
The big ones. Um, but for the most part, dude, everybody's been like really great, and I think that's a fear too, as like you're putting yourself out there when you're younger. You're like, oh, people are just gonna shit on me or like get into
Yeah.
the comments of my posts and like say
Yeah.
terrible stuff. No, dude, I've had almost zero like negative comments except for YouTube for whatever reason. It's not coaches. It's like
YouTube?
game. Yeah, it's like it's little wildlands over there. It'll
Yeah.
be like no, it's funny. It'd be like me skipping, and then like some like 14-year-old kid be like, "That's gay," like
Yeah.
stuff like that. But
The
those
world's
type of
healing, but not in the best way. Yeah.
yes, yes, constructive criticism on YouTube.
Yeah.
But no, man, like I said, like the I don't know if it's every community of coaches or if it's nice how social media has kind of connected us all at this point. But the community of coaches that I've found myself in uh, is awesome. Is awesome. So I think there's enough people out there. There's enough clients out there. There's plenty of pie for everyone. So like there's I guess abandoning this scarcity mindset where I guess in the past it made sense when we all just had brick and mortar locations and like you had to it was competition uh, and now one of the positives of social media and online reach is there's just endless people that need help and need coaching. Um, so I think it's helping us kind of let our guard down a little bit and be more communal as coaches. And I think more guys are realizing that, and it's cool to see happen. It's cool to start to be a part of.
For sure. And we get sucked into either end of it, right? We kind of start racking our brains on what we just talked about in the rant part is like it's such a volatile community, but at the same time, it's led to so many more connections. Like just talking to you, talking to some of these coaches, I'm just like at the beginning, you can't even believe that talking to some of these people. But what you do recognize, and we've recognized from a coaching standpoint, that it's all about the person, and coaches are just people,
Sure.
right? So we're talking about things we love. We want to be justified for the things we think. So it's talking to people that understand our point of views. We're connecting with like-minded people. It's also a pretty lonely profession for one that involves so many people in your day to day at the
It is.
like I'm all by myself. I'm against coaches and I'm against athletes. I'm with coaches and I'm with athletes, but the good is the good, the bad is the bad, but you're alone. So being able to this is our AA, this is our
Yeah.
S&C AA where we get to be like, "Hey man, I feel
Definitely.
this." You're like, "I see you, you're valued," and I
Yeah.
agree. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, no, it always feels good after I get off like this. Like I'm gonna have a jump in my step for the rest of the day. But anytime, even just a phone call with the coach, like it feels good. It fills you up a little bit because you're right. For as many people as we interact with, it can be kind of a lonesome at times.
That's it. That's
So
it.
it's good.
I agree. All right. Well, this has been a fantastic chat. Like I said, I could do this all day long. So we'll have to do it again. We'll chat on the back end and see if we can give this thing a little bit of a name, get our microphones all set up, and make it a little prettier. But you're helping with that. So I wish you a good day. Um, and yeah, thanks for hopping on, man.
Yeah,
I'll
brother.
see
No,
you.
I
I'll see you Sunday.
yeah, yes, I'll be there. And no, man, I appreciate it. I appreciate being on the pilot episode
Yeah.
because I know this thing can get legs. You have the goods, so I have